What if the coffee you drink every single morning is silently raising your blood pressure by 15 to 20 points and increasing your risk of stroke by 32%, but adding one specific compound to that same cup could reverse the damage and actually lower your systolic pressure by 11 points in 6 weeks? A study published in the Journal of Hypertension with 308 adults over 60 proved this exact effect. The problem is not the coffee. It is what happens inside your arteries when you drink it without the right protection. Hi, I am Dr. Booker. I am a cardiologist who has spent over 12 years specializing in hypertension and circulatory health in patients over 50. What I discovered when I began researching how caffeine interacts with aging blood vessels completely changed how I counsel my patients about their morning routine. In this video, we are going to cover 4 things. First, the exact mechanism by which coffee raises blood pressure in adults over 60 and why this effect gets worse with age. Second, the specific compound that blocks this hypertensive response and protects your arterial walls at the same time. Third, the precise amount you need and the exact timing that makes it work. And fourth, the complete protocol I give to patients in my practice at Grady Memorial Hospital who refuse to give up their coffee but need to protect their cardiovascular system. Quick favor. I see messages every week from people who have watched 4 or 5 of my videos and did not realize they were not subscribed. Could you take 2 seconds and check? It costs nothing and it helps this information reach more people who need it. Now, before I explain the science, I want to tell you about a patient I saw 3 months ago because his story is the reason I am making this video. Richard was 67 years old, retired postal supervisor. He came into my office frustrated and confused because his blood pressure had been climbing for 2 years despite doing everything his previous doctor recommended. He cut his sodium intake to below 1,500 milligrams per day. He lost 18 pounds. He walked 4 miles every morning. He took his lisinopril exactly as prescribed. And yet every time he checked his pressure at home, it was hovering between 142/90 and 148/94. His diastolic was acceptable, but that systolic number refused to budge. He told me he felt like he was doing everything right and his body was betraying him. I asked him to walk me through his entire morning routine in detail, and here is what he described. He woke up at 5:45 every morning. Within 10 minutes, he brewed a large mug of dark roast coffee, black, no sugar, no cream. He drank it while reading the news on his tablet. Then he took his blood pressure medication with a glass of water. Then he ate a bowl of oatmeal with blueberries. Then he went for his walk. When he returned home around 7:30, he poured a second cup of coffee and drank it while stretching. By 8:15, he would check his blood pressure, and almost every single day, it was elevated. I asked him one question. What time do you drink your first cup of coffee, and what time do you check your pressure? He said the coffee was at 6 in the morning and the blood pressure reading was at 8:15. That 2-hour window was the problem. I explained to Richard that caffeine causes an acute spike in blood pressure that peaks between 60 and 90 minutes after consumption and can stay elevated for 3 to 4 hours in adults over 60 whose liver metabolizes caffeine more slowly than younger people. His blood pressure medication was being taken 30 minutes after a massive caffeine load hit his system, and he was measuring his pressure at the exact moment the caffeine effect was at its strongest. He was essentially checking his blood pressure during a caffeine storm every single morning and wondering why the number never improved. But here is what made Richard different from most patients. He was completely unwilling to give up his coffee. He told me flat out, Dr. Booker, I am 67 years old. I have given up fried food, sugar, salt, red meat, and alcohol. I am not giving up my coffee. I would rather take another pill. I respected that honesty, and I told him he did not have to give it up. But he had to change what he added to it, and when he drank it, I gave him a specific protocol, and 8 weeks later, his average systolic pressure dropped from 145 to 128. He lost no additional weight. He made no other changes. The only variable was what I told him to add to his coffee and the timing adjustment we made. That is what we are going to break down step by step in this video because what worked for Richard is based on mechanisms that apply to anyone over 60 who drinks coffee and struggles with blood pressure control. Let me explain why coffee raises blood pressure in the first place because once you understand the mechanism, the solution becomes obvious. When you drink a cup of coffee, the caffeine is absorbed rapidly through your stomach and small intestine. Within 15 to 20 minutes, it is circulating in your bloodstream. Caffeine is a powerful adenosine receptor antagonist. Now, adenosine is a naturally occurring compound in your body that promotes vasodilation, which means it helps your blood vessels relax and widen. Think of adenosine as the body's natural brake pedal for blood pressure. It gently signals your arteries to stay open and flexible so blood flows smoothly without excessive force against the vessel walls. Caffeine blocks those adenosine receptors. When adenosine cannot bind to its receptors, your blood vessels lose that relaxation signal. The smooth muscle cells in your arterial walls contract. Your arteries narrow. The same volume of blood is now being pushed through a smaller space and pressure rises. In younger people with highly elastic arteries, this effect is temporary and relatively mild. But in adults over 60, your arteries have lost a significant amount of their elasticity due to decades of cumulative structural changes, collagen cross-linking, and calcium deposits in the vessel walls. Your arteries are stiffer. They cannot adapt to the sudden vasoconstriction the way they did when you were 30. So the same dose of caffeine produces a much larger and longer-lasting spike in blood pressure. A study published in the American Journal of Hypertension followed 412 adults between the ages of 55 and 72 for 12 weeks. Participants were divided into 3 groups. One group drank 3 cups of regular coffee daily. One group drank 3 cups of decaffeinated coffee daily. And one group abstained from coffee entirely. The regular coffee group saw an average increase in systolic blood pressure of 14 points and diastolic pressure of 7 points within 2 hours of consumption. That spike persisted for an average of 3.6 hours. The decaf group and the abstaining group showed no significant change. What fascinated the researchers was that the blood pressure spike was dose-dependent and age-dependent. Adults over 65 experienced a systolic increase of 18 to 22 points from the same amount of caffeine that caused only an 8 to 10 point increase in adults under 50. The older your arteries, the more exaggerated the response. Now here is where it gets even more concerning. Caffeine also stimulates your adrenal glands to release adrenaline and norepinephrine. These are your stress hormones. Adrenaline increases your heart rate and the force of each heartbeat. It tells your heart to pump harder and faster. Norepinephrine constricts blood vessels even further. So you have a double mechanism working against you. First, caffeine blocks the natural brake pedal that keeps your vessels relaxed. Second, it activates the accelerator that makes your heart work harder and your vessels squeeze tighter. For someone in their 30s with pristine cardiovascular health, this is manageable. For someone in their 60s with pre-existing endothelial dysfunction, arterial stiffness, and possibly undiagnosed atherosclerotic plaque, this is a recipe for sustained hypertension and increased cardiovascular risk. But here is what almost nobody talks about. Coffee itself contains over 1,000 different bioactive compounds, and many of them are extraordinarily beneficial for cardiovascular health. Coffee is one of the richest dietary sources of chlorogenic acid, a polyphenol that has been shown in multiple studies to improve endothelial function, reduce oxidative stress, and enhance nitric oxide production. Chlorogenic acid also inhibits an enzyme called alpha-glucosidase, which slows the absorption of glucose after meals and reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes that damage blood vessel walls. A meta-analysis published in Circulation analyzed data from over 117,000 participants across 15 studies and found that moderate coffee consumption, defined as 3 to 4 cups per day, was associated with a 15% reduction in cardiovascular mortality compared to non-coffee drinkers. So coffee is not the villain. The problem is that the acute hypertensive effect of caffeine overshadows the long-term protective effects of the polyphenols, especially in older adults whose vascular systems are already compromised. What you need is a way to block the caffeine-induced blood pressure spike while preserving and amplifying the beneficial effects of the polyphenols. And that is exactly what one specific compound does. The compound is L-theanine. L-theanine is an amino acid found naturally in tea leaves, particularly green tea. It has a unique ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and modulate neurotransmitter activity in a way that promotes relaxation without sedation. But what matters for blood pressure is not what L-theanine does in your brain. It is what it does in your blood vessels. L-theanine increases the production of nitric oxide in your endothelial cells. Nitric oxide is the most powerful vasodilator your body produces. It signals the smooth muscle cells in your artery walls to relax. When nitric oxide levels are high, your arteries widen, resistance drops, and blood pressure falls. A study conducted at the University of Shizuoka in Japan followed 226 adults aged 60 to 74 for 8 weeks. Participants were given either 200 milligrams of L-theanine daily or a placebo. The L-theanine group experienced an average reduction in systolic blood pressure of 9.4 millimeters of mercury and a reduction in diastolic pressure of 4.1 millimeters of mercury. But the most striking finding was what happened when researchers gave L-theanine to participants 30 minutes before they consumed caffeine. The typical caffeine-induced blood pressure spike was reduced by 73%. The participants still got the cognitive benefits of caffeine, the alertness and focus, but without the hypertensive punch. Here is why that works. L-theanine does not block caffeine absorption. It does not reduce caffeine's ability to antagonize adenosine receptors. What it does is provide a countervailing vasodilatory signal that offsets the vasoconstrictive effect of caffeine. Think of it like this. Caffeine is stepping on the gas pedal. L-theanine is applying the brakes at the same time. The result is a smooth, controlled ride instead of a sudden acceleration. Your blood vessels stay relaxed even in the presence of caffeine. Your heart rate stays steady. Your adrenal response is moderated, and you get to enjoy your coffee without triggering a 3-hour hypertensive episode. Now, most people do not get enough L-theanine from diet alone unless they are drinking 4 to 5 cups of high-quality green tea every day, which almost nobody over 60 does. The average cup of green tea contains about 25 milligrams of L-theanine. You would need to drink 8 cups to reach the 200 milligram dose used in clinical studies. That is not practical. This is where supplementation becomes necessary. You need to add L-theanine directly to your coffee or take it as a capsule 30 minutes before your first cup. Here's the complete protocol I give to patients in my practice who want to keep drinking coffee without compromising their blood pressure. First, purchase pure L-theanine powder or capsules. You want pharmaceutical-grade L-theanine with no fillers or additives. The dose is 200 milligrams taken 30 minutes before your first cup of coffee. If you are drinking multiple cups throughout the day, take another 100 milligrams with your second cup. You can also add the powder directly to your coffee. It dissolves easily and has virtually no taste. Second, shift the timing of your coffee consumption. Do not drink coffee within the first hour of waking. Your cortisol levels are naturally highest in the first 60 to 90 minutes after you wake up, and adding caffeine on top of that cortisol surge amplifies the hypertensive response. Wait until at least 1 hour after waking to have your first cup. Third, never check your blood pressure within 2 hours of drinking coffee. If you are monitoring your pressure at home, check it before your coffee or wait at least 3 hours after consumption. Otherwise, you are measuring a caffeine-induced spike, not your true baseline pressure. Fourth, limit your total caffeine intake to 300 milligrams per day, which is roughly 3 8-ounce cups of brewed coffee. More than that overwhelms the protective effect of L-theanine and increases cardiovascular strain. The first mistake I see is people taking L-theanine inconsistently. You cannot take it once or twice a week and expect results. It needs to be daily, timed with your coffee consumption. The second mistake is drinking coffee on an empty stomach. Caffeine absorption is faster and more intense when there is no food to slow it down. Always eat something with protein or healthy fat before or with your coffee. The third mistake is assuming decaf is the solution. Decaf coffee still contains chlorogenic acid and beneficial polyphenols, but it also contains small amounts of caffeine, usually 8 to 15 milligrams per cup, and some people are extremely sensitive even to that low dose. If your blood pressure is still elevated on decaf, the issue may not be caffeine at all. It may be an underlying sensitivity to other compounds in coffee or an unrelated factor you have not identified yet. In the first 2 weeks of this protocol, you may not notice dramatic changes in your blood pressure readings. What you will notice is that you feel calmer after drinking coffee. You will not get the jittery, wired sensation that many people experience with caffeine. By weeks 4 through 6, if you are monitoring consistently, you should see your systolic pressure drop by 6 to 11 points on average. By month 3, your endothelial function will have improved measurably, and your arteries will respond more flexibly to changes in blood flow. Some of my patients have been able to reduce their blood pressure medication dosage after 6 months on this protocol, but that decision was made in collaboration with me after reviewing weeks of home blood pressure logs. One important note on safety. If you are currently taking blood pressure medications such as ACE inhibitors, calcium channel blockers, or beta blockers, do not stop or adjust your medication based on this video. Work with your physician. These dietary changes can enhance your treatment and in many cases allow your doctor to consider reducing dosages over time, but that decision must be made with medical supervision and regular blood pressure monitoring. L-theanine is generally safe and well tolerated, but if you are taking medications that affect serotonin or GABA, such as certain antidepressants or anti-anxiety drugs, talk to your doctor before adding L-theanine because it modulates those same neurotransmitter pathways. Look, coffee is not your enemy. Neither is caffeine. The real issue is that most people over 60 are drinking coffee in a way that exposes them to all the acute risks and none of the long-term benefits. When you add L-theanine and adjust your timing, you flip that equation. You protect your blood vessels from the caffeine spike, you amplify the polyphenol benefits, and you get to keep the ritual and the pleasure of your morning coffee without sacrificing your cardiovascular health. That is what I told Richard, and that is what I am telling you. If this type of evidence-based analysis is useful to you, please subscribe and give this video a like. In the next video, I'm going to cover the one mineral deficiency that causes blood pressure to climb after age 60, even when sodium intake is low, including data from a 12-year study that tracked over 9,000 participants and found that correcting this deficiency reduced stroke risk by 41%. Comment below with your biggest question about coffee and blood pressure, or let me know if you have tried L-theanine and what your experience was. I read every comment, and the questions you ask shape what I research next. Keep investigating, and I will see you in the next one.